So this is what I do, because sometimes I don't feel motivated. A lot of the time I don't feel motivated, or I feel distracted by something, or, whatever. You know it. There's a list that we all can make of whatever it might be. And I'm really guilty of prioritizing the list over my creative work. Super guilty of it. And then all of a sudden you're like, what just happened to 6 months? Like it's not like 2 days. It's like, what? Like I haven't written anything. And it's like shocking. I set a timer for like 20 minutes and I clear everything else away around me. And I just try to write about anything that might be in my head. And it's not necessarily, it's not lyrical form. It's not like, why can't I write? Like I'm not, that's not it. But it's like, get an idea and write something. Like write about the person you saw on the street. Write about, what we were talking about, the anthropomorphizing. It's like, what is that? Like, what about that little beetle that you saw crawling on the street? What is it? Who is that? Who is that trying to get someplace and it's taken them a really long time? Who does that look like? Whatever it might be. And I just write until my timer goes off. And then either I'm going to be like, that was so hard, I'm done right now. Or that wasn't so bad, I'm going to set a timer for another 20 minutes and see how I feel when that's done.
Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm thrilled to have with me today Jamie Leonhart. Born in the heart of New York City and shaped by a legacy of music, Jamie emerges as a genre-defying artist with a spectrum as vibrant as her history. From her earliest days wielding a violin at age 3 to her vocal explorations influenced by an eclectic record collection, Jamie's foundation in music is as rich as it is diverse. A graduate of Barnard College with a bachelor's in English literature, she has led bands, performed with the New York Metro Mass Gospel Choir, and graced stages at prestigious venues like New York City's Joe's Pub. Jamie's unique sound, a blend of jazz, indie pop, and cabaret, engages audiences with emotional authenticity and dynamic performances. Her songwriting delves into the human condition, exploring themes of vulnerability and transformation through meticulous research and poetic flair. Jamie's contributions to the music industry extend beyond performance. She's a sought-after voice for brands like Neutrogena and Kohl's, and has collaborated with artists such as St. Vincent and Steely Dan. Her debut album, The Truth About Suffering, was released on Sunnyside Records, followed by her latest, The Illusion of Blue. A commissioned artist of the Public Theater's New York Voices project, Jamie continues to push creative boundaries, captivating listeners with her powerhouse vocals and innovative compositions. Thank you for joining me today, Jamie.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
I'm so excited to sit down and talk with you. I was very delighted to be introduced by a mutual of ours. Do you want to tell us briefly a little bit about your story for those who are just meeting you for the first time today? A bit about your background and how you got where you are in the biz?
Oh my goodness. How long do we have? No.
Let's pour a drink and get cozy.
No kidding. If we were together in person, Sarah, we would. I think it's a kind of circuitous story, and I'm not going to make it as circuitous as it is, but like as you said, I've always been surrounded by music. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was a cantor, and had an incredible voice, but also an incredible love for all sorts of music, all kinds of music, and was a real champion for me when I was younger. Just always very interested in what I was doing and supporting me. Not literally supporting me, but there as support. And but I grew up playing the violin. I have 2 other siblings. Like we all were given an instrument to play when we were kids. And it was important that we had music in our lives. But neither of my parents were musicians. My father has an amazing ear and could be an American songbook like historian if he ever chose to be. But, it was just not the path that they took, but they really supported all the kids exploring the arts in whatever way. And so I sang through high school and I sang through college. I quit violin when I was 17. I decided I didn't want to, further it as I got into my college career. And I just joined bands and I sang back up in bands and I did all the things that you do when you're exploring, right? And then I was like, I'm terrified of this. There is no path. There is nothing that is going to make me feel comfortable or comfortable is not even the right word, Sarah, but you're nodding. So I know that you know what I'm talking about. Like
I do. There's a lot of shaky ground in this business.
A lot of shaky ground. And I feel like at that time, it was much different than it is now, where there are so many schools that are either succeeding in or very much trying to have ways to get young people to understand the business of music and what to do and how to prepare yourself, just like you would if you were going to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. But there was none of that back then. I didn't even get a degree in music because in my school, which was a liberal arts school, it was classical or bust. And I didn't want that. And so I got an English literature degree and, learned to write beautiful lyrics as a result, But so I applied to law school, Sarah, and I got into law school. And then I said, the only thing is I don't want to be a lawyer. That little thing, which would be a very, very expensive dive into something, right? So I didn't do it. And then I kind of like fought demons for a while and like really went, until I was like, I just have to try it. I just have to see. And, just started getting a little more confident in singing and joined some bands again and started singing. And then, was able to like almost through a fluke, start doing voiceovers and start doing commercial music just by word of mouth. Like you meet someone at a party and they're like, and you sing a song at the party and they're like, holy,
Yeah.
come and do some commercials with us. And that's honestly like how my career has developed. Like, it's like being prepared and meeting the right person at the right time,
And that, honestly, that is the story that I hear like over and over from people. I mean, this is an industry that, I don't know, maybe you can, but there's not a lot of stories of like, okay, here's the sights I'm setting, and that's just going to be a straight path from here to there. It's not. It is about relationships and that like preparedness meets opportunity combination.
Yes. And there were times, and I think we'll talk about this later probably, but there were times now that I can look back that I wasn't prepared, and I was like, I was frustrated with myself and, and I tried and I think I failed, and it's okay, but I failed because I wasn't ready, but I wanted so much to say yes to something that I said yes before I should have said yes, but you want opportunity though.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we've all done that. I've for sure done that as well where I've said yes to things that I knew I wasn't ready for, or I didn't really have the chops for, or I didn't, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And generally my attitude is say yes first, figure out how second.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of situations that served
works.
me very well.
Totally.
And sometimes it has really shot me in the ass.
Yes.
And I've ended up in a professional situation where I shouldn't have been there. And what it did was actually put my worst foot forward and probably put me in a situation where I didn't get work down the road from people who I might have otherwise gotten work from if I had actually been the right person for the gig.
Initially. Right. Absolutely. Right. And we're speaking the same language. Yeah.
So there are times when saying no is actually a really great answer.
100%. And I think that's part of like the wisdom of of like doing it for a long time. It's like, it's totally okay to say no.
Yeah.
You know, your no has to be a real no, not a no out of being afraid or, you know, just because you're not sure or like you don't like one person on the project or whatever. Like it has to be a real, like, I'm not ready for this. No. Or like, this project doesn't need me. Or
Yeah.
I don't like this project, you know, like, and if it's a real no, and like I've been exploring like what that means. Like someone said to me, in order to say a real no, you have to be able to say a real yes. In order to say a real yes, you have to be able to say a real no. And I was always like, what the hell does that mean? I was like, oh my God, I really do get that. That means a lot. Right.
It means really actually doing some like internal work to figure out what those things mean for you, because they're not the same in every situation, but usually your cues are.
Right.
Right? That's what I have
Right.
figured out for me, that like my internal body cues around yes or no might not even make sense to me, but I can be pretty sure that my body is telling me what it knows.
Yeah.
So I just have to be willing to listen and choose to not ignore it when I think that I know better.
Exactly. Oh, but you could figure this out. You're a smart woman. You can do that. Right. And it's like, maybe sometimes no, you know, maybe the no is really just a no.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe the no is because there's something better for you that's just around, around the corner. You don't know why that no is a no always, but sometimes the no is because there's a really great yes that you just don't know about yet. But if you've said yes to something that's half-assed,
Yeah.
then you're not available for
You're
something
not
else.
available, something else. And then you're stuck in in that thing. And then maybe if you're human, you get resentful that you're stuck in that thing. And then you do a shitty job and then you still don't get hired by the person you don't even want to hire you anymore. You know, like
I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you. So, I mean, we may have already just answered some of this, but on the Vocal Lab, we aim to shine a light into the industry through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then. So, with that in mind, if you were starting your career all over again, is there anything that you would specifically do differently?
I think I would be more patient with myself. I think I made a lot of early decisions based on and like kind of from anxiety, from being worried that I was going to miss an opportunity, feeling like because I was young in the industry that I didn't know better necessarily. So, like, I would sign a contract with a producer that I didn't really like the way we worked together. And then I had a year-long contract that I was like, "Whoop, I'm just going to wait it out. I don't want to make any music with him." You know, like, and the day that that was over, I was like, you better have learned something from that. So, and I did. And I try to impart that to students, you know, or, you know, young musicians that I work with. But I think, Sarah, it's really like trusting myself and giving myself if I had given myself more time to understand why I was making the decision and not, I think the fear of being rejected or left out or someone else was going to get the job if I didn't say yes immediately without reading the fine print. Um, that I was just miserable a lot and like not doing the best job that I could have.
Mm-hmm.
And then like wasting my time and energy when I could have been choosing less better.
Yeah. It ends up being a much bigger energy drain to have to be constantly putting energy into things that you wish you weren't doing,
Yes.
rather than uh, putting energy that is rewarding to output into maybe fewer projects or whatever, but things that are of value to you, that you enjoy doing, where it's filling you up in some way, whether that is creatively or in a monetary sense or in a career advance. I mean, there can be a million different ways it can fill you up, but um, when you're putting out energy in a way that fills you back up,
Mm-hmm.
it's an entirely different ball game than when you are constantly feeling like you are putting out energy into projects that you wish you had said no to begin
Right,
with.
right.
And here we are back at the
100%.
wishing you'd said no, right?
Wishing you said no. And I think the other thing is like not taking up my authority, like not taking up my authority. And it's still, like I'm not going to be like, no, I always do. And it's not a struggle anymore. Like it is a real struggle. It's a real struggle. And sometimes I have to say, like, wait a second, like, what am I doing? Why am I giving the power to that person just because they show up as an alpha? Like, because I don't show up as an alpha. Like I never have, probably never will. Like that, like this alpha. Like I'm like this alpha. I'm not this, but like, the one that walks into the room and everything goes right to them. Like, but sometimes I'd be like, okay, like I rolled over onto my back, like, oh, the alpha just came in. And I just started saying, well, why are they so great? Like, just because they do that, like, what's the, what's the cost of giving up your authority to that? Like, then you have no opinion, your voice doesn't matter. And you're just like in that project, but like, I don't know, there's no, or it's like, could be someone else's project, could even be my own. If I'm working with someone and they start the takeover or whatever it might be. And then if I just let that happen, it's my fault, like, but it's like, it's that I'm totally going around in a circle with it, but you know what I'm saying?
I do. And I think that I don't actually have any idea where you sort of land generationally. I know for me, like I turned 50 last year. And so I'm in a generation where I feel like I'm bridging the gap. I look at like my parents' generation, women in particular. I mean, I'm also like a whole family of musicians.
Right. I read
My
your bio.
parents
I
were
know.
professional musicians and my grandparents and everybody was. And women absolutely just sort of gave the power away. It was somebody else's choices, somebody else's decisions.
Right.
And I look at my children who are not in music, but they are in other creative endeavors. And generationally speaking, they are much less prone to just automatically give the power away. They will in a certain group context when that's appropriate for
Right.
compromise and when roles are established, but it's not the default. And
Right.
I'm in the in between where it's like I try not to, but I have to constantly work at that and remind myself. And
Yeah.
I think that there is actually a generational piece of learning around undoing that patterning that happens, that we're navigating.
That is fascinating, Sarah, because I am in the same generation. I'm in between. I'm 52.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's fascinating. I love the way that you just put that. And it's like there is the younger generation really is understanding how to take up their authority. They're playing with it. They're molding it. Our elders kind of gave in, especially very stereotypical female roles. And then here we are in the middle, like, okay, I don't want that, but I'm not all the way there. And I'm, yeah, really, really well framed.
It's an interesting thing to observe and maybe give ourselves some grace around, knowing that it's in process, but there's a lot of factors there beyond just our own shit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Good. I like that.
So along the same lines, if you were starting your career all over again, is there anything that you specifically would do the same all over again?
Probably not. I mean, but I would still, I think it's just like really having the love for it and being afraid, but still going for it. Like, I think that it's like having that innocence of like really just wanting to make music, like really just wanting to sing, really just wanting to, create like that. I would never give up. Like, and I would do that again. Like that. I never want to lose that.
So in an industry that there's a lot of different levels of education from no musical education, just all self-taught, to,
Mm-hmm.
uber academia and everything in between. And in different genres, different things are, more drawn upon and or less necessary. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to talk about how your education has played into one way or the other, has played into your career, like the effect that it has had or not had in your career?
I think what I was saying before, is that my degree I finished with my college degree and I didn't go to graduate school, didn't go to law school, as you know.
Yes.
Um, and I didn't go to school then after that for music
Mhm.
either. So, my actual education was really in like literature. And then, as I said, I kind of switched from the music major to a music minor. And I did a lot of world music, jazz, all different. Like I studied, the origins of, I dabbled in kind of wanting to go work at the World Music Institute and become an ethnomusicologist. But there was so much theory and everything in getting an ethnomusicology degree that I was like, I just feel like I don't want to do that, and but it was still something that I really loved. And so I always loved all different kinds of music. And in my education, I kind of got myself, like fed myself Brazilian music, fed myself in, classical Indian music, fed myself whatever I possibly could through all different courses. And like Columbia University had great, I graduated from Barnard, but I had access to my core stuff was at Barnard, but we had access to the whole university for, any other courses that we were taking. And their music department was amazing. And so I really, anything that I was doing outside my major was at the music department, just taking just as many courses as I could.
Yeah.
So I left with just this like reverence for world music. And this was way before we could just go on our computers and look up a YouTube video of, Senegalese musicians or something. So I went to a lot of World Music Institute concerts. I kind of like did an ed self-education in that way. And, because I'd always played violin and my sister played piano, like I taught myself piano just by watching her and taking her books and reading her books. And we just had a very musical household. And I continued that after we lived. And then when we were older, we lived kind of in the same building. And so we'd go upstairs and we played piano together. And we had like those 4-track tape recorders, like
we had one too.
Oh my God. And so we'd be like, okay, let's do, Stevie Wonder and I'll track all the voices, to turn the tape over and do the other voices. And, so I feel like I was always doing that. So it was more of a self-education as far as the artistry goes, threw myself into bands. My ear is really good. And so I could harmonize. I could do a lot of different things without thinking about it. So I don't know if that wholly answers the question. Does it wholly answer the question?
I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer or anything. It's just, I think it's, this is one of those questions that I ask pretty much every guest on the show, because I think it's important to recognize that different genres of music sort of lend themselves to different kinds of education. And so like if you are in classical music, it's really hard to go far in classical music without getting a fairly formal education.
Absolutely.
In jazz, there are a select few who do it by ear, but for the most part, an education in jazz is going to serve you well. In pop music, you don't really have to be. You can do it all by ear because it's a much simpler. And by that, I don't mean that it's not as good in any way, shape, or form. I do mean that it tends to be less complex, though, in terms of chord structures and harmonic structure and all of that stuff. So there's a lot in pop music where I've had lots of guests say that sometimes their music education felt like a deterrent, like it was it didn't serve them well in pop music because they tried to overcomplicate everything. So I just think it's an interesting avenue to sort of explore with everybody and open it up that there's a lot of different educational pathways in music, and it doesn't feel like any one of them is right or wrong. They are just different. And people do a lot of
Absolutely.
different things with a lot of different information.
Yeah. And I think that, two things that just came to mind when you were just talking about what you just said. One is, I do think, sometimes I do hear from people, sometimes they're like, I don't know if I needed everything that I did. Right. And then other people, it's like, that's their pace. That's helpful. And like I was listening, I don't know if you ever listened to the podcast that Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast, Wiser Than Us. Have you listened to
I haven't
that?
heard that one, but I will check it out.
Wiser Than Me. That's what it's called. I love her, but she interviews women who are older than her,
Okay.
who are wiser than her. So it's like she interviews, and she'll say, do you mind me asking how old you are? And, Carol Burnett's like, I'm 92, and like, but it's like just fabulous women all of, across the board. Why I bring it up is that she recently interviewed Bonnie Raitt, and it was a beautiful interview. Like,
I will check
beautiful.
it out.
Like they're both crying. I'm crying listening to it, but Bonnie Raitt essentially says, if you put a chord chart in front of me, I'm not going to be able to, like, I'm not going to read it. Like, that's not how I learned. I learned because sitting in my bedroom and just listening and playing and figuring things out. And, she talks about how, she worked her ass off.
Yeah.
But it was in an organic, different kind of way. Right. And so, but I agree with you that if I were in a classical realm, if I were in the music theater realm, if I were in, the jazz, what's interesting to me about the jazz realm is like, it's so big, like jazz is so big, as and so it's like, I think there is this kind of center of a Venn diagram, right? Like that lives between pop and jazz. There's like the 3/4 chord pop, right? Which like can be so unbelievably effective to the point where like if I have a voice student who's like, I want to learn X song, and I'm like, well, it's a cool song. I love the way that the melody moves differently. And then I look at the chords, I'm like, there are only 3 chords in this whole song. And I'm like shocked by it though, because the production is so good. The melody changes so much, the dexterity of the lyric, whatever it might be. But then there's also, the pop music that we could look at, like Regina Spektor or Fiona Apple, these are, and people who are more contemporary, Leve, who's like not totally a jazz singer, but like.
Well, even some of the, like Sarah Bareilles and some of the,
Right.
I mean, she crosses over into musical theater as well, but
Right.
like her
It's like, but you
harmonic
got your
structure is not
9s and your
straight pop.
7s and your
Totally.
11s in there, and you've got unexpected things happening, So it's like, it's a different kind of pop that like you do kind of need to learn something about what you're doing and where you're going more than the 3 or 4 chord progressions. You know what I mean? So there's so many different levels. And I think, again, it speaks to us being able to say like, I'm missing something. What do I need? Where do I get it? Like I have a student who is, I keep saying, I'm confusing people when I say it, but he's an adult, over 30 adult.
Yeah.
And he is like creating his own grad school. He has taken all these different musicians, teachers, arrangers, and is like, I want to learn this from you. I want to learn this from you. And that's his education.
Yeah.
So it's
and
like.
He will come out of that probably better equipped for the thing that he wants to do because he has not spent money, time, energy on the extraneous information that is not what he is interested in.
Absolutely.
And if he doesn't care about the piece of paper, then you know what
He
I mean?
doesn't.
Then it's
He doesn't
better
care, right.
learning.
Better learning. He's like, oh, do you know someone who teaches German leaders to a beginner? I'm like, absolutely. And so it's like he's spending probably less money than he would on grad school. and it's more efficient. So that's a different way of educating, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about relationships. And I think I said earlier, so in this context, I think I said earlier that I feel like the music business is so much about relationships. And this is another question that I tend to ask most guests. Um, I am not specifically asking you to name names, although you can answer it in any way that you want to. I
Okay.
am more asking about the nature of the relationships. What are the important relationships that you feel have uh, contributed to your career, personal or professional, but that have contributed to your career over the course of your career, getting you from the starting point to where you are now?
Hmm. I'm not sure if I know how to answer that question, Sarah. I think like there are things that come and go in phases, and relationships. It's like I feel like there have been different times in my career where I've been associated with different collections of people and we've fed off of each other. And then that ends for whatever reason. It could be friendships end, or it could be people, move to different cities or do whatever. There are certain people that keep coming back into my life in different ways. And we deepen our creative relationships together each time, or they come up differently. Um, my husband, Michael, has been a kind of constant in, I guess for the past 20 years or so. We've been married for 20 years, but he's been, you know, as far as someone who I've created with, I bounce ideas off of, I collaborate with him in some of his projects. He collaborates with me in some of my projects. So he's been my biggest constant. And like my dearest friend has been the one to say, like, don't do that. Or why aren't you doing that? Or, and she's been kind of my constant, mm, like my stability when I feel incredibly unstable, in any of it. And I'll call her and say, like, am I making a mistake and not doing this? Or tell me why I'm not doing, whatever it might be. So it's more like that. Like I think there's the different groups that come in and out. And then there's those constants that are kind of always there, but give different information
Yeah.
across the timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about your songwriting process?
Yeah.
So, I'm going to quote from the bio on your website. A
Okay.
songwriter, Jamie writes about vulnerability, patience, frustration, shifting perspectives, and trust. A lot of my music explores the human condition in its most basic form. Simple and to the core can be very effective. You're also a keen researcher and examine the minutia of a topic before and I can't say that word.
Anthropomorphizing.
Yeah, that's the one. To inhabit your material.
Mhm.
Nature and natural occurrences play large roles in your creative work as well.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about?
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot. It's a lot. Do you want to talk about the process when you are writing? Like what does that look like? Some people,
Mm,
it's a scheduled time every day. Some people wait till the muse hits and.
mm. Well, okay. Let's get down to brass tacks.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like there are sometimes times where the muse will hit,
Mm-hmm.
and that's great. However, you can't wait for the
Yeah.
muse only, and I'd love to only wait for the muse, like, believe me. But I also feel like I have to sit down with a timer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I do, because sometimes I don't feel motivated. A lot of the time I don't feel motivated, or I feel distracted by something, or, whatever. You know it. There's a list that we all can make of whatever it might be. And I'm really guilty of prioritizing the list over my creative work. Super guilty of it.
So easy to do.
So easy. And then all of a sudden you're like, what just happened to 6 months? Like it's not like 2 days. It's like, what? Like I haven't written anything, and it's like shocking. And so what I do, and what, like, this is kind of a good thing, like, Jamie, do this. Okay. But what I do is I set a timer for like 20 minutes, and I clear everything else away around me. And I just try to write about anything that might be in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not lyrical form. It's not like, why can't I write? Like, I'm not, that's not it. But it's like, get an idea and write something. Like, write about the person you saw on the street. Write about, what we were talking about, the anthropomorphizing. It's like,
Yeah.
what is that? Like, what about that little beetle that you saw crawling on the street? What is it? Who is that? Who is that trying to get someplace and it's taken them a really long time? Who does that look like? Whatever it might be. And I just write until my timer goes off. And then either I'm going to be like, that was so hard, I'm done right now.
Uh-huh.
Or that wasn't so bad, I'm going to set a timer for another 20 minutes and see how I feel when that's done.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll only be within like an hour that I have time for. You know what I mean? Like, if there are days where I'm really feeling like I have nothing else on my schedule, I'm not putting anything else on my schedule, and I'm going to try to just be really take these ideas that I have, take these fragments that I have. That's like a different day, right? But as far as starting it going, it's usually lyrical driven.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not like, oh, I have a melody. I have a much harder time writing lyrics to a melody than I do writing a melody to lyrics or chord progression, to
Got it.
lyrics.
So you write, it's almost more like writing poetry first, and then you write the music to it later.
Yes, because I'm like, what does this feel like? What does this sound like?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this feels like it's 6/8. These lyrics are move like they're 6/8, and I don't know that. And if I try to like write the music first, then I feel like, oh, I have to get something in here that's 3 syllables.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that. I do it, but I really hate it. I hate that. It's just not my, like my core doesn't
Yeah.
like it, doesn't feel
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
So that's like what I try to do, and then usually I'll have, like, as I said, a handful of half songs,
Yep.
and then I'll sit down for that longer period of time and be like, okay, what is this? Is this worth finishing, or is it not? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not.
I just think it's so fascinating to hear different people's writing processes, because some people, like you, start with lyrics and add music later. Some people, it's the opposite. They start with music first and add lyrics later. Some people, um, which is how I've always done it, it's
Mm,
everything everywhere
at
all at
once.
once.
Ah,
Um,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I can't remember who it was, but somebody was talking about they don't ever start a writing session without a title.
Wow.
Like that's
Yeah, like
that's
that's
their
their
first step,
thing.
is
Yeah.
they start with a title and write the song from there. So it's just, again, it's one of those things that there is no right or wrong way. There's just a lot of different pathways to the same end. And I think it's fascinating hearing different people's processes, because as an emerging artist, as a younger emerging artist who's maybe just at the beginning part of their writing journey, I think
Mhm.
it's fascinating to like play with those different ways of approaching it, and maybe it'll open up something entirely new for you to approach it a different way.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely.
So you have your degree in English literature.
I
You,
do.
you are not the only songwriter. Doesn't Don Henley, doesn't he come from an English
Does
lit
he? I don't
background?
know.
I
Probably
believe
does. I
so,
don't know.
which is why I've always liked his lyrics. Um, yeah, I believe that he has a background in English lit as well.
That's
Um,
funny.
do you want to talk about how you approach the concept of storytelling in your writing? Um, and then maybe in your performance as well, because they're not necessarily the same answer.
Mhm. How I approach storytelling in my writing. Um, I don't know if my writing has so much story, honestly, in it. Um, I mean, I as much as it might be about exploring an emotion or exploring and getting from point, like we do move from one place to another, but it's, I've always really wanted, honestly, to be able to authentically write like a Dylan kind of, just like these like, they're so evocative. They're so like, we get not, from point A to point B, or we travel through a city, or we go somewhere.
Yeah. Just so
and
narrative.
Like, the narrative. Like I just, I don't really have that. Like, and again, like that is what sometimes some people do. Like I'm pausing myself for a second to say, I teach private voice, at SUNY New Paltz, which is one of the New York schools, and not New Paltz. I'm totally lying. It's not New Paltz at all. I've said that before. I'm lying. Totally take that out.
Okay.
It's SUNY Purchase. You don't have to take it out, but it's SUNY Purchase. And I've been teaching there for about a year and a half, and it's wonderful. And what a lot of these kids, so they have a robust classical department. They have a robust jazz department. Samara Joy just came out of there. And then they have a contemporary music department that's it's a studio and composition. And so these kids, young adults, they take all different kinds of songwriting classes. They take all different kind of production classes. And so they will have the assignments: write a narrative, like write a narrative song, write a this kind of song, write a first person song, write a third, and so their assignments, kind of like what Kat does at Berkeley, is to just throw all these different things at them that they have to practice, and they get to do that in school, and they might discover like, wow, I'm really good at that narrative kind of song. I had no idea, so I haven't thrown that at myself, because I also know that the language that I work with and when I write, it's usually really satisfying to me, and it will take us on an emotional journey, but not the typical narrative, folk kind of journey. I totally forgot the question now that I just said all of that, Sarah. Tell me
We were
again.
just talking about
Again.
storytelling in songwriting.
Right. The closest I've come to like a narrative, I think, is I wrote a one woman, like musical narrative, that I performed. I had the opportunity to develop it like through a handful of different grants between the public theater, and then I went down to Philadelphia and worked on it there. And it's about the kind of collision that happens, and I don't know if you experience this, but between being an artist and a new mother, like a first time new mother, and how like feeling like I was not doing either well, but you can't not do one of them. And so that exploration, it goes from pre-pregnancy, when I'm like, I'm great, like, to birth and the first 5 years of parenting. And so that is a real narrative, but it's a longer story, and that's where, and it was so new to me to do anything like that, to have dialogue, monologue, all of that was super new, but amazing. Like, it was amazing. And I'd like to go back to it, revisit it, and potentially even remount it, revisiting it, to making some changes, seeing what feels like it still is so organic and essential. But I rewatched it recently because another person wanted to see it. And I was like, I'm going to watch it and then I'll send it to you. So I loved it. Like, I loved it. And I was moved by it. And I was like, that's still real. That's very true. That is a struggle, and the responses I got from people was like amazing, like amazing. People were like, you're saying what I've been feeling. And not only people in music, Sarah, it was like just people who had parenting plus X, something that you don't feel like you could ever do without, but somehow you're like, I'm sucking at it right now. Terrible.
And I'm curious. I know that the perspective that um your work was written from was the perspective of mothering. Was the response all from, like, you used the word
Mothers.
parent? That's why I'm asking. Was it all from mothers, or was it from mothers and fathers?
It was mothers and fathers. It was mothers and fathers. But it was honestly anyone who, I mean, it was usually in some kind of parent or guardianship role that they had. Um, but, but it was, but it was not just the women who had birthed the children. It was anyone who had that hardcore guardianship. It wouldn't be like, oh yeah, my wife takes care of it. It's not
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
But even like a gynecologist came up to me and she was like, or an OBGYN, and she was like, you're speaking what my patients come in and think they can only say privately to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a big piece. And I think that's why I was actually really curious whether you got response from uh like male parents as well around
Mhm.
that issue, or if it was more profoundly felt by women parenting.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the way that we set up the project was that Michael, my husband, was my MD,
Yep.
and he wrote a lot of the music with me, and he was the only man on stage. I had an all female band, and I talk very, very plainly with candor about, like, there's one song in which we talk about like getting ready to have a kid, and, we're like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. And then he says, and then the lyric is, and then he says, when we have this baby, I'll help you out. And my backup singers are like, what? Because it's like, I don't want your help. I want you to co-parent. Like, and so it was like, and he was sitting there as the representative. So it's like he being there on the stage allowed also like some men who maybe were feeling like, oh, to be like, okay, this is okay. Like went through a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that you have the opportunity to remount or um, make available in some form, because just very selfishly, I would really like to see it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
experience it.
for sure. I
Yeah.
would love that. Yeah, one of my
Yeah.
friends is from Toronto, and she's been saying, "Bring it to Toronto, and we're going to get it. We're going to get it." So I'm working on it. I'm working. That's one of my goals, Sarah.
Yeah. Well, if you take it to Toronto, let me know, because I just might have to plan a trip to Toronto.
All right, you got it.
Let's talk about um, the routine in the studio.
Mm,
Let's talk about your routine in the studio when you are working on an original project of your own, because that's going to be different than when you are being hired to sing on somebody else's project.
hmm
So let's start with when it's your own project, what that looks like.
Yeah. So I love to spend as much time as possible pre-production.
Mm-hmm.
So that meaning all the arrangements being done, depending on what size band it is. Sometimes if it's, the arrangements still need to be done, but like if it's obviously just like piano based drums or something, then it's going to be simpler than if there's a big horn arrangement or if there's something else going on. Um, but everything needs to be done before going in. I'm not a hey, let's try this out in the studio kind of person. I know a lot of people who are super successful at that, and that fills me with like just beyond anxiety. Like, um,
To
so
mention that if you're paying for studio time, it also
right.
fills you with a much larger studio bill.
Much larger studio bill. So pre-production, all the arrangements, like all the musicians, getting everybody, if I can get things to people in advance, whether it be charts or rough recordings of what we're going to be doing, so that everybody's kind of going in with an idea of like what we're going to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I'm doing something that has and then choosing the studio that you feel so comfortable in, right? The vibe of the studio, people who work at the studio, whoever's going to be engineering. Like, I need to feel like they're my buddy. Like we can go, like, they're not going to be weirded out by anything that I do. I'm going to trust that they're not blindly recording me, that someone's going to stop me if something is going on that's not like worth spending another 5 minutes recording,
Yeah. And I
And
think that's actually a really important piece. So I just want to stop and emphasize
yeah,
it, because I think, especially as a newer artist that doesn't have a lot of studio experience yet, understanding that you really don't just have to go with the first studio that has availability or is the
right.
right price tag or whatever.
No,
You are going to get a better end result shopping around a bit and finding the studio that makes you feel good being there, and you trust the people that you're working with, and the whole, like, everything that you just said, it
yeah,
is going to show up in your final product
100%.
sonically.
Absolutely. From the way that everything's been recorded to the sound of your voice,
Yes.
because you will feel at ease. If you're not at ease, you could sound perfect and you're still going to hear that something's missing. Like, the soul of the piece is going to be missing. And I 100% believe that. Um, and then, I think just like functionally, like, get the bigger group out of the way first. Like, if you have 2 days tracking, like, get the big, the big numbers out of the way first. And those would be like, you know, again, I'm just going back to, like, if there were horns, and I work on this. Michael has produced my records. And so we work intimately with, like, how does this work? How is this working out? Like, what do we envision? But so the way that we've done it is, we'll have the horns record all together, like ensemble style, but obviously drums are isolated, and sometimes piano, but sometimes, we'll have done the piano in advance and then the horns are playing, but it depends. And then solos sometimes we'll play live, but sometimes we'll give them space to overdub, like, in case, like, you want to really get that delicious take and they're, like, just focused on the chart or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um, and then I usually end up redoing my vocals. Like, I don't think, like, I might do a good one when I'm laying down the scratch tracks, but I always feel like I understand it even more once I've heard what everybody has put down. I don't do the, like, audio file recording. I kind of would like to now, but I used to be really afraid of, like, the audio file, like, let's all just get into one room and sing and play and let's see what happens. I'm curious about it now. I think I didn't have the confidence to do that when I was younger. Like, I was a little bit, I am a perfectionist, but I was like a closeted perfectionist then. And so I was really afraid of doing it wrong. And now I can be like, I really want to do it right, but let's just see what happens, And so, but typically I will have another day that I will just do all my vocals and do the harmonies. And I like to do some of my own harmonies, but I like to have a couple other people come in because I love the difference of the voices, the textures, the timbres.
Talk
It's
more about the art
yeah,
of backup singing in a minute, but
yeah, yeah,
100%. And that's a thing that, experience wise, younger artists may not have yet had the opportunity to learn, that yes, you can do all your own vocals, all your own harmonies, and there is a sound to that. And that might be what you're going for, but you're going to get a completely different texture when you have different voices in there,
yeah.
that can give you a totally different sound. Um, some really juicy loveliness when it's not all
100, right?
just
Like,
you.
juicy and delicious. That's what
Yeah,
we love. Yeah.
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 And then when you are hired as
Mm,
a vocalist to go
yes.
in, and we'll talk about live stuff in a second too, but when you're hired to go into the studio as a vocalist on
Yeah.
somebody else's project,
Yeah.
what are the important parts for people to know about stepping in that role?
I guess in some ways you have to be utility. Like, you have
Yeah.
to have unless they're like, oh my God, your voice is so weird and wonderful. And I just want your weird voice.
Yeah. We're
Right.
hiring you as the character actor.
Right. We're hiring you because there's something about your voice that is so distinct that that's what we want. But If that's not the case, then utility, because it's not you anymore. It's just like you're really good at what you do, but you have to do what they're asking of you as long as what they're asking of you is reasonable.
Right.
Right? If you
Important
go in,
point.
you're not going to like, if someone comes in, asks you, oh, you can sing all this really low stuff. Can you sing like an operatic high C and hold it out for 10 bars? It's like, that's not really fair. It's like you're
Yeah.
kind of a jerk for asking that. And then the expectation is that the artist is going to be like, sure, I can do it. And like, and it goes back to what you were saying before, Sarah. It's like we say yes until it's like, no. Right? So it's like, I think you have to be 100% professional. You have to be ready. If you've been given the material in advance, you have to learn the material in advance.
Mm-hmm.
If you say you can sight read, you better know how to sight read.
Yeah.
Don't pretend and be like, I hope I can get it by ear, because you're wasting their time and money.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not one to fudge on. Say, yes, I can, or no, I can't, or
Right.
I do a little bit. Like,
Right.
but
Right.
be
Right.
clear.
Be clear. Be clear, because otherwise it's like you're not representing yourself correctly, and it's disrespectful a little bit, right? And then have fun. Like,
Yeah,
and then have a lot of fun. Like, that's the thing, because it's so fun.
it is.
It is, right? Especially when it's like a group singing, like it's so fun. There's
It
nothing like
really
it.
is. Some of my most fun musical moments in my whole career, a lot of them, honestly, have been group situations. And I mean, I've worked in a band and done lots of like party
Yeah.
band stuff,
Yeah.
and I've done lots of lead stuff as well. And there are moments there that I'm very fond of as well. But there's a magic that happens in group singing when everybody's just on that same plane and everybody's, blending and doing their job well. And it's just like you get the goosebumps going on because
Uh,
everything just gels and it's so
yes.
great.
So good. It's like it's
Yeah.
euphoric, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly. And
Truly.
there's something that is there. And this actually kind of harkens back to what you were talking about at the beginning around, or I think there's a relationship here. You were talking at the beginning about giving away authority or claiming authority. And I
Mhm.
think that there's a piece when you are a working backup singer where you have to be very comfortable sitting in that place where you are not the person with the authority, where you
Right.
actually are giving that away because this is somebody else's job. This is somebody
Right.
else's gig. You are showing up to do justice to their vision, not your own.
Exactly. You are a supporting character.
Right. So this
And your
is
job
this
is
is
to
not the
uplift
time for the
them.
main
Right.
character energy.
Right. Everything that you do uplifts them. Right? Like
Right.
that's our job. That's our job.
And there is something that is beautifully I can't quite find the word for it, but there's a lack of pressure in it. And it's not like you still have to show up and do your job really well,
Yeah.
but there's this lovely piece where you aren't responsible for all the things, every piece of what's going on. You
Yeah.
get to show up and be like one magic Lego piece in the whole thing.
Right. 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 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. You have worked with a lot of other artists as a backup singer.
Mm.
Um, you have worked with Steely Dan, Donald Fagen, St. Vincent, Judy Kuhn. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Kuhn.
Kuhn, thank you,
Mm.
Paul Brill. Um, that's been a combo of studio and live work?
Yeah,
Yeah,
combo of studio and live. A lot of it is I guess it depends on which artist. Yeah, so combo, I would say.
yeah.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk any further about, yeah, sort of the skills? Are there different pieces that show up when you're working live as a Bee Gees singer than in the studio.
I think
And
live is obviously, I mean, live is live, right? Live
yeah,
is, and you know, like in some ways the stakes are higher live because
mhm,
it's just you, right? Like there's at least in the work that I've done, there's no one is auto tuning us, you know. And I know, like I understand that is like some industry standard right now, and we could have a whole different conversation about that. But I'm not, like that. But for me, it's like I have to be totally in tune, and I have to be totally in tune with the two other people or one other person that I'm singing with, and with the person that we're supporting.
right.
Right. And so the live is like, you're like, okay, wait, why is the bass so loud in my ear? Oh, I need to take that down, to put that up, whatever, and while you're still looking really lovely or whatever on stage, right? As um, so live is so fun, like it's so fun and it's so charged and sometimes you're exhausted, whatever. But it's like, just like you were saying, when you're locked in and you're like, this is happening right now in this very minute. That's amazing. Like, and I honestly always feel that way. Like,
Yeah.
even if I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, blah, like poor me, as if, but like the moment that starts, I'm like,
Yep.
oh my God, I get to do this. I get to do this. This is me. Wow. Like I will never, ever treat it like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, ever.
I happen to be someone who suffers with like chronic migraines that are,
Oh no.
I, I've gone through cycles of them, some bad years where, it's like 5 days in a dark room,
Oh,
several weeks out of the month, just like
yeah.
bad streaks of
Yeah.
them. I have had to go on stage when I was like mid migraine, and I would be like almost blind and haven't
Yes.
eaten in 3 days and whatever. And I'll tell you what, the lights come up and you walk on stage and it all stops.
Mm,
Like all the pain stops, everything stops. It's like this little window in time. And I don't know if it's like the endorphins and the adrenaline, whatever, kick in.
yeah.
And for that 45 minutes of that set or whatever it is, I'm entirely unaware of any migraine business.
Yeah.
And then the lights go down and I'm off stage on a break and it's back immediately and I'm huddled in a dark corner until the next set starts and it turns off again. So there's a thing that happens
Yeah.
that I think it just like takes us to another place. And
I agree with you.
I have been
Yeah.
so grateful for that in my.
Oh, Sarah, I am so sorry that you have those migraines. And I'm so glad you get to still, step out of it, even for that short period of time.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing to learn that
Mm,
it all just turned off when I was in that place, actually.
yeah. Thank goodness.
And I think that like the art of being a Bee Gees singer. So for instance, you were talking about tuning. You have to tune to the lead singer and you have to tune to the other uh, backup vocalists.
Hmm.
And there's a thing that I think, uh, I mean, people who are backup vocalists, they either just figure this out um, instinctively or it's a thing that they have specifically learned along the way. Younger or emerging artists don't necessarily know this part yet because I talk to students about my voice students about this part a lot. But when you are tuning vocals, it is not actually just the notes that you have to tune, the
Mm.
vowel shapes,
Vowels. Oh my God. Are you
right?
kidding? Yes. Vowels.
That
Where do you cut off? Do you cut off on the T? Do you hold the S a little bit longer? Oh my goodness. Oh, it's not. Yes, you're 100%.
But that thing, like you can be cent for cent. You can be singing exactly the same pitch, but if you were singing different vowel shapes, it is going to sound out of tune.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. When I was learning, I sub for two of the Steely Dan singers, and I've been doing it since 2018, I think. And when I was learning the parts, LaTanya Hall, who was just like, a master, like she's just killer all around. She'd be like, cut off on the one. Don't wait till a second after the one. And she took me through the paces, because especially with Steely Dan, it is really specific. It is really
specific.
like, and she like just took me through everything, as you were saying, and was like, don't make it a T, make it a D. Do this, do that. Make it more of an E, less of an A, like da da da. And so that I had this wonderful map already that was like, this is how it has to be constructed. And then I could get it into my own body, and then I could work on it with them,
Yeah.
But as you were saying, it was like, it is a science. It is a science.
Yeah. Well, and Steely Dan, like it has such a specific sound. In fact, I have sung on projects where the directive was, we want this to sound like Steely Dan backups.
Right.
It is such a specific backup vocalist group sound.
Yeah.
And has been through the entirety of that band's career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They sound like Steely Dan.
Right. You don't mistake it. You're right.
No.
Yeah.
No. That's one of those bands that honestly, as a singer, I'm envious. It's one of those where you kind of always want to, I would love to sing backups for, you can name
I thought that for a long time until I got the opportunity. I was like, I'm really ready.
And then was it terrifying?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. To this day, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we did. Like, the first day stepping on, I was like, what? But but it was a real yes, Sarah.
Yeah.
It was a real yes. I was terrified, but it was a real yes,
And let's talk about the realities of touring with an instrument that lives inside your body. Because live work, studio work, touring, life in general, all of these things have an impact in a way that a mechanical instrument like a horn, where you're depressing keys, or a guitar, or not that those players aren't affected, but not in the same way that vocalists are.
Right. Right.
So do you want to talk a little bit about how you care for your voice under those circumstances to make sure that you can show up to the gig and put your best voice forward?
Yeah. I don't have an extraordinary regimen, honestly. Like I have the tools to have one should I need it, and we can talk about like all that. But for me, I make sure that I'm always hydrated, like more than always hydrated. Sometimes I have a steamer with me. And if I feel like I really need it, then I'll use it. I vocalize every day. Like really don't miss a day of vocalizing. So even like leading up to leaving, like going, like, so I have my regimen, like that's down. So, and then, and this is like, it's obviously super personal for everybody. Everybody has their different thing. I don't drink, like I'll have a glass of wine every once in a while in my life, but I don't drink alcohol at all when I'm performing, because I feel like for me, again, for my system, it affects my system far too much, whether it be drying myself out, not sleeping well, anything like that. So I choose to kind of say like, whatever I'm putting my body has to be feeding my instrument. I don't drink, I already kind of set myself up. Like I don't eat wheat, I don't have dairy, I don't eat meat. And so all of those things, I feel like I'm giving my body its best opportunity to be helpful to me as the singer, and I'm not suggesting that everybody has to do that. And understood. Like it's not, everybody has their own thing, but for me, I understand that the less crap I put into or the less things that my body doesn't really have, that has a hard time processing, the
Yes.
less that goes into my system, the more that I won't get sick. I won't get a cold. I won't have, like stomach ache or, some kind of reflux or something that would affect my throat. I don't sleep with air conditioning on. It's like just like taking care of the instrument. But then I'll also have, the number to my ENT if I need him, knowing that if I'm going to be traveling, if there are, I don't have serious allergies, but like if there are allergens that are going to be in super places, or if some place is really dry, to know that the environment that you're going to be walking into, you know, I don't know. So it's not like a hardcore, I have my honey and I have my this and I have my that, but more like I want to make sure I'm always preparing my whole somatic instrument to be ready
Totally.
to sing. I practice yoga every day, so it's more like if my whole instrument feels good, then likely my throat will feel good.
You have done commercial voiceover work for Lifetime, Trulia, Kohl's, Betty Crocker, Neutrogena, Tresemme, Johnson and Johnson, some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
And
some heavy
you've
hitters.
recently also provided voices for films After Yang and Marcel the Shell with
Yes.
shoes on.
Have you seen Marcel the Shell with shoes on?
I have not.
It is one of the sweetest movies. I highly recommend it. It's Jenny
Okay.
Slate. She started out with this little character and did shorts that were like on YouTube or whatever. She's got this crazy voice, and Marcel is this little shell, and he lives in this house in the movie with his grandmother, who's voiced by Isabella Rossellini. And and it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful story. Like it is truly beautiful. And I had the opportunity to provide it's like I'm not a lead voice in it, but to provide, a lot of the background family voices and little things that you just hear interspersed throughout the movie. It was wonderful. And then, like you were talking about doing, like how background vocals, like group singing makes you feel like that, so excited and that euphoria. There's something in, for movies or television that's like group speaking,
Yep.
ADR. So
Yep.
that and that is kind of like what we also did for After Yang, but it was during COVID, and so I had to got all these different people, and we all recorded separately, and it was like, do this part and do this scene, and the sound designer really trusted me to help put it all together, and we provided, what he wanted and needed, which was I was so thrilled that we could. But at the beginning of that movie, there's this like world dance competition. And so it's like there's a voice that dictates what everybody needs to do, all the different families. And so I did that at After Yang, and that was like super, super fun. It's fun. Again, it's like, I still have that, like, I know it's a job and I know it's, like you're getting paid for it and you're doing your job. And I also am like, oh my God, I get to do that. That is so cool, and I don't do it as frequently. I'm not in the voiceover world quite as much as I used to be. I'm kind of transitioned more into some of the singing and teaching, I feel like it comes and goes. It's in flux. Like I don't depend on it for my livelihood, but I absolutely love doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny you were talking about doing that during COVID. I know a number of people who are voiceover actors in Vancouver, and
Mm.
they talked about that period of time and how like everything transitioned to home, and all of a sudden everybody had to set up a studio at home to do their work. And then now all auditions are,
Oh,
self-tape and
oh my
sent in
God.
and whatever. Kind of changed the whole industry.
Really
But
changed the industry.
what it also did was change um, the entire social sphere for those actors, because their entire social network happened at the studio
Yes.
between auditions and in the group ADR stuff, like between takes
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of those kind of things. And that
It's
didn't
gone.
happen for years.
And it
I
doesn't
don't
really
know if
happen
it's back
anymore.
yet.
Honestly, it doesn't really happen anymore. You don't go to the agencies anymore. You don't do that anymore. And I think, and not to, this is like a whole different conversation, obviously, Sarah, but like, I felt that way about music during COVID too. Like I stopped performing 100%. I was just like, it makes me so sad to sing to my computer. And I couldn't be that for other people. I couldn't.
Yep.
I had other friends and they needed to be that for other people. They needed that. I was not one of those people. I was just like, I'm just not going to sing for a while. I'll sing to myself and that's fine.
Yeah. It's funny. During COVID, we did, my husband he doesn't play professionally anymore, but he used to in years gone by, guitar player and singer. And we had all our kids at home, and his son is a guitar player and singer, and my kids all sing, and two of them play various instruments. And we did a little porch concert, and our neighbors, another neighbor of ours was doing it every night at 6:00 when the pots and pans got banged for the healthcare workers. She would come out and do a song or two with her karaoke machine, and everybody would like gather in the alley
I
distance,
love
but
that.
hang out. And so they kept asking us about it. So we did it, and we did like a set of tunes one night on our porch, and it was so fun because we were doing it with our kids,
Yes,
but
yes.
yeah,
You're
I
doing
think
it
we
with your
did
kids and you were
twice.
doing it with people
Yeah.
receiving you, even if they were receiving you from a distance, but like you gave them something and they could take that and they gave back to you. Right.
Yeah.
And that was necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. So let's transition a little bit and talk about your teaching. So you studied under Jeannie Levetry, and you are now a certified somatic voice work instructor, correct?
Yes.
And I have taken my level 1, but I have not
You
taken the
did.
other levels. Yes, I took it number of years ago now. Actually, she was in Vancouver and did it here. And I've wanted to go and take my level 2 and 3 for so many years. And I know this is like the last summer she's doing it. And I'm not going to make it there this summer. But you serve as faculty at the Somatic Voice Work Institute, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your teaching private and the stuff that you do through the Institute, and tell us about that part of your life?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so my private teaching, is I have students like my youngest is turning 10 and my oldest is 82, 83, 82 or 83. And some of my students are, professional touring musicians and some are afraid to sing happy birthday, like literally come because they're afraid, and I really feel the way that I teach is functional in that we want to make sure that everybody knows how to use their voice, like their whole voice. I feel like that's part of my job. You wouldn't be like, oh, I'll teach you to play piano, but only your right hand,
Right.
like, so to understand, with somatic voice work principles, just of like how the whole voice works. And then, for me, it's like really understanding what each student, client, person needs.
Yep.
Generally, and then in each lesson.
Yeah.
Right. And so they can be so vastly different from one another. And I think there's just it's grounded in function, if for the most part. And then in like, who are you and why is your voice special? But like I have a student who like, he came to me initially because he was just like, I really used to love singing and I hate it now. And I just want to love it again. And, without going through anything personal, but like one day he came and he was like, I really zone out when we do exercises. Like I really vowels and things like that. They're just like, and I was like, oh, well, as I could tell him to sing, oh, on a, second slide in chest register forever. And he's just going to be like, why am I here? And so I was like, okay, well, what if we make up phrases? What if we take a phrase from a song? And so I would take we would just make up like anything that I would be like, in my head, I'd be like, there's an O and an ah in there, right? In my head. And so we would start working that way. And then I'd be like, okay, let's take the first line of In a Sentimental Mood and let's move it up by half step, each time. And so then I'm getting to him to sing certain things. But it's like, I feel like I love approaching students creatively and really understanding what they really need. Not if they're like, I don't really feel like it. Like that I'm not interested in. And you're not either. Who is? But just seeing how am I going to get you not only to where you thought you wanted to go, but then beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I go into the studio with people, I vocal produce them, help them kind of get the expressive, whatever they need or want in the studio, like try to get them to be alive in those spaces.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting to hear different approaches and I think specifically I really like the somatic voice work approach of it being like there's all this very functional stuff, but having it come from that place of feeling first.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big fit for me. And I know not everybody processes information that way. And like in that
But you
order.
don't have to though. But that's the thing is that I think that I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Please.
I got excited, but it's like, Sarah, I think part of the like learning that we do is like you're watching your student and you teach, you watch your student, you're like, how are you taking things in? Right. So some people might be feeling and some people might be that they might be real oral learners, and then other people might be, need metaphor and they're like they're learning through thought and imagery, so like I had a student the other day and she was like, it just sounds. And if I say to her, how does it feel? She'll be like, I have no idea how it feels, but I'm like, how does it sound to you? And then she can describe it. And that's part of it. It's like I think we as the teachers, you, me, we have the feeling, right? Like we have that everything comes in and then we have to like download it someplace else before we go on to the rest of our lives. Right. And so we're taking all of it and we're having all the feels for like what they're doing. But we can say, okay, this person is an oral learner. So I'm going to say, what does that sound like to you? Can you match that thing that you just did? Can you make that same sound that you just did? Or if someone's like, I felt that in my whatever. And you're like, okay, can you get that feeling back in your thing? Or I hated that. I love that. And so however each one learns, it's like we're tracking what they're learning, but we're also tracking how they're learning it. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because, well, you just said like we as the teacher, we're feeling all the things.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really had this conversation with other teachers, so I don't know if everybody has this experience or not. I will often say to my students, luckily it's always with students who know me well first by the time I say this, because otherwise it could sound super weird. But I often say, hang on, I have to put that in my mouth. And and I have to put the sound that they are making in my mouth.
Let me see how you're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I can feel what is happening to create that sound. I have to put it in my body to understand the body mechanics that are getting to the end point that they are getting to then translate how to like tweak things to get a different result.
Yeah. I hear that. I get that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I also think it's interesting that the metaphor, like teaching through metaphor and imagery and stuff. And I get that things like, I don't know, breathe with your belly. I get that we're not really breathing with our bellies. Air doesn't go into your belly. Right. However, it's like as I have matured as a teacher, it's also that part of exactly what you said, learning to listen to the language that the student uses to describe their experience
Mm-hmm.
and mirroring that language back to them, because that is the language
Right.
that makes sense for them.
Right. But I always say that to them. I say, you just said that you felt that in your nose. I will never tell anyone to feel something in their nose unless they have already told me that information about them. Like, so it's like, I will only say, because in my head, I know that I'm saying, okay, they got to head register doing X, Y, and Z. And then she told me, oh, when I went there, I felt it right here.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say, for you, I might reference to you, remember that place where you said you felt it right here? Can you go back there?
Mm-hmm.
But I will never say to the next student, my last student got head registered by feeling it right here. Can you do that too? Because that's nonsense. It's like, you don't feel like she felt it here, but like that's totally subjective. Like, and so that's why like staying, I won't work in metaphor, but I will do it once someone has told me this is how I'm learning this from you. I'm not going to be like, I don't care, only sing head register,
And I will sometimes use imagery with students that I initiate, but I will preface it by saying, I want you to try this and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we're going to leave it behind.
Right.
And I'm saying this knowing full well, this is not actually what's happening in your body, but it sometimes can be helpful to picture it this way.
Exactly. My version of this is not science.
Right.
I say, this is not science.
I also will flat out sometimes say to people, I don't want you walking into another voice teacher studio and saying, my last voice teacher told me to XYZ.
Exactly.
Because that's not what's actually
that
happening.
Comes into your studio and you're like, whoa, okay. Right.
But I have learned to like listen with ears that trust a little more that everybody's doing their best, and sometimes it's lost in translation.
Absolutely. Right. With you.
Is there anything that you see often missed or misunderstood by artists or writers?
That's an interesting question. I don't know, Sarah. That's I almost have to chew on that question a little bit. Because there's certain times where I could rail against the commercial pop world, and then I feel like everything is missing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other times where I'm like, well, but why? Like, because it's satisfying and serving somebody, I don't know, so I feel like it's hard. And that's a little bit like I feel almost wishy-washy about it because I have strong opinions sometimes about things like that. And then I feel like, well, I'm leaving other people out though with my declaration of that's not art, or they're missing the point, or they're just trying to get to the finish line quickly. And, and it's like, I don't know. I haven't lived in their shoes. I don't know what they're doing, so I'm not sure.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you feel is really important for up and coming artists to know? Or alternately, a great piece of advice you'd like to leave them with?
I feel like we touched on so much, Sarah. I feel like we did a good job. I really think it's that try not to second guess yourself. Know what you don't know.
Yeah. It's a tightrope to walk.
Mm-hmm. And see what it means to self-educate or find the education wherever you need it. And it can be in weird places, like you and I said. It doesn't have to be traditional education. It can be ask someone to mentor you. It can be, finding an artist that you really admire that is, not calling Sarah Bareilles and being like, hey, can I come work for you? But finding someone and, can I intern with you? Can I hang out with you, for a day and just follow you? Or whatever it might be, there's so many different versions of it? Can I go to a studio and ask them if I can just sit and watch a session?
Yeah.
To see like what goes down, provided that the artist is okay with it, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's so many things, there's so many creative ways and to be creative, like to not feel like you have to fit yourself in a box somehow, and that you don't always have to, going back to what we said, you don't always have to say yes. You don't always have to say no. You just want to make sure that you're saying it from the spot that's not because you're, you know, not dealing with something that's inside of you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can people find you? Web, social media, show
Yeah.
listings, any of those kind of things?
Yeah. So I mean, my website is pretty up to date. I know people don't even like do websites so much anymore, right? But it's simple. There's no real bells and whistles on it, but it's just my name, Jamie Leonhart, .com. And I am on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but I'm never on it. Rarely on it. But Instagram, I do post things and reels and things like that. And yeah, be playing a show coming in July. If anyone's in New York, I'll be playing at Joe's Pub. But that's on the website. And recordings are all on all the different platforms. Everything that has been released is everywhere.
Excellent. Well, and I will link all of this in the show notes as well. So I just really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me today. It's been fun to talk through all the things.
It really has, Sarah. It's been so much fun. I really have enjoyed this. I never know what to expect, but it's been like such a wonderful, like, just flow of a conversation. And like, you didn't ask me my top 5 exes. And as we talked about when we first talked, those lists make me so unbelievably anxious that I would fall under the desk if you asked me to. So I'm so glad that you didn't. No, it was wonderful. It felt like such a great flow. And like, you dropped some knowledge on me. It's good.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing your time and wisdom and joining me today.
Thank you.